Okay, so today we will be talking about crisis survival skills for social distancing. As Angie said, I'm Katie Burns. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself and then we'll get into it. So, um, so who am I? So I am an advanced extern at Wesleyan. This is my second year in counseling and psychological services at Wesleyan. Before that, I was at the University of Hartford's counseling and psychological services. A little bit about my education. I have a bachelor's in biochemistry and molecular biology from UMass Amherst. I have a master's from the University of Hartford, and currently I am a doctoral student at the University of Hartford. I will be completing my training next year at Emory University. Another side note too is that since 2016, I've served as a community mental health provider. So the skills here today, I've found that they work in a variety of settings, whether it be in community mental health, whether it be with college students, and I've picked my favorite skills to use with clients. And so my goal is that you'll be able to find one skill that's helpful for you. Not all of them might not work, but if you can just find one and you can adapt it, however it works for you, that is the goal here. So let's begin. So what I would like you to do is, I realize we're all pretty stressed and we all have a lot going on right now and we're all adjusting to using Zoom. Myself, this has been quite the learning curve. So I'd like us to kind of get grounded and get comfortable before we begin. So we're going to do a nice mindfulness activity. So what you'll do is you're going to find a nice comfortable position and I'm going to read you some questions. Now I'm not going to read all of them because we don't have enough time. So I'm only going to read 5 and they are in bold and blue. And you'll just listen to each question and then notice the response that comes up for you. Okay, so let's start. So the first question is, can you feel your hair touching your head? Can you feel the distance between your ears? Can you feel a change in the temperature in the air around you? Can you imagine something very pleasant? And then lastly, can you feel a heaviness in your legs? All right, so this activity, again, this was meant to kind of ground you, bring you to the present moment. As I've said, I know we all have a lot going on, and some of these questions I had never even thought about before, like, can I feel my hair touching my head? Can I feel the distance between my ears? No one had ever asked me that. So this is, again, really bringing you back to your body and the current moment. So a lot of the presentation today is going to be about two opposing forces, really, acceptance and change. So when I think of acceptance and change, I think of two very different things, but you can actually make them work together and work in harmony, and to help you have better control over your world and also figure out what inside of you and outside of you can accept. And so this is basically a dialectic. So you're bringing together two opposing forces. And so really this presentation is going to help you navigate what is going on for you personally that you have to accept, and what's going on outside of you that you have to accept. And then also figuring out, well, if you don't have to accept it, what can you change? And so we'll go over that. And a lot of this presentation too is based on dialectical behavior therapy, which was created by Marsha Linehan. And essentially what Marsha Linehan has come up with, that there are these 4 modules that can help you create a life worth living. So the first one is mindfulness, kind of what we just did. So this is being aware of the present moment without judgment. The next module is emotion regulation. So that's understanding and reducing how emotions affect us, figuring out ways we can navigate our emotions that make them workable for us, and really helping us to deal with and change unwanted emotions. Another module is interpersonal effectiveness. And so that's getting our needs met, maintaining relationships. It's also maintaining our self-respect and our self-worth, and recognizing when relationships aren't healthy, when they are healthy. But lastly, what we'll be focusing on today is distress tolerance. So this is really, these are your crisis skills. This is getting through a situation without making it worse. This is figuring out what you can change, what is in your control to change, but also if you can't change it, what you can accept and how you can make this acceptance and this change work together. Okay, so I'd like us to think about, we have different states of mind for certain situations. So on this slide, you'll see that we have reasonable mind, wise mind, and emotion mind. So reasonable mind, as you may have guessed, is when you're ruled by facts, reason, and logic. So you're not really thinking that much about emotions. You're more just kind of looking again at the factual things of a situation. You're, as they describe, cool and rational and task focused. So when I think of when reasonable mind would be effective, I think of doing like a math problem, because you're not really using that much feeling in it. I mean, you could be, but mostly you're using formulas and solutions. And then if we jump over to emotion mind, that's again, as it implies, you're ruled by your feelings, your moods, your urges. You're not really thinking about the factual part of things. You're just taking into account how you're feeling. And so when I think of emotion mind, I think of things that might be creative. So painting a picture, you're not really thinking about facts of things. You're thinking about what colors like speak to you or feel good or work together. But in more complex situations, you want to be able to find a balance between reason mind and emotion mind so that you can make them work together, because in a lot of situations, we need our facts, we need our reason, but we also need our emotions too. So a lot of the skills we'll be doing today, we're going to teach ourselves how to move from emotion mind and into this wise mind so that we can use reason and emotion to navigate a situation, especially with what we're going through now. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're doing a lot of distress tolerance skills in this presentation. And so these are for tolerating really painful events, urges, and emotions when you can't make things better right away. And when I say better right away, you can't make it better in the next 5 minutes. So you really need to figure out how you can get through it and survive for however long it might be. And so I usually refer to distress tolerance skills as crisis survival skills, at least that's what they're meant for. So let's first talk about what is a crisis. So crisis, as you may have guessed, is when the situation is highly stressful and it's short term, so it's not going to last forever. So you're only really going to use these skills for when you're in a crisis. They're not going to be everyday skills, but they're just for that period of time when a crisis is going on. And then a lot of times what you might notice when you're in a crisis, you have really high emotions and there's so much pressure on you to resolve it now. It has to get fixed now. But again, going back to this, there's not always a solution where you can fix it in the next 5 minutes. So you have to figure out a way to work around that pressure. So when do we use crisis survival skills? As I said, you're not going to be using these all the time. They're not everyday activities unless you're in a crisis every day. But they're just for a crisis. They're not for daily activities of living or anything like that. So to identify a crisis is you have intense pain that cannot be helped quickly. Going back to like what I said, if you can't fix it in 5 minutes, that's how you know. You want to act on your emotions, but it will only make things worse. Have you ever had a time where you thought, yeesh, I should have taken a step back before I did that? Or, ooh, maybe I could have done that a different way if I'd given it some time. Or, wow, my emotions really got the best of me during that. That might be a time where you know, okay, it's time to use crisis survival skills. Going back to that drawing of the circles, it's when emotion mind threatens to overwhelm you and you need to stay skillful. So again, your emotions are so strong that you're not using facts or logic because again, they're overwhelming you. But you got to find a way that we can make both of them work because as we know, our wise mind, which is combining our rational and our emotion mind, is what's really effective for complex decisions. And the next one, you're overwhelmed, yet demands must be met. So even though we're in a crisis, we have a lot of things we still have to do. Like we still have to go to work, still have to go to school. So although we have these emotions, we can't let them overrule us, and things still need to get done. And then lastly, arousal is extreme, but problems can't be solved immediately. So right, again, that intense feeling, but it's not going to go away because it can't go away right away. You have to get through it. Um, so we're in a crisis. Oftentimes we have this lovely thing that our brain does, and it's called the stress response. And so what happens is we come into a situation that is stressful, and our brain sends us signals that we can engage in the following ways. We can do fight, flight, or freeze. So fight is when you go towards the stressful situation. Flight, as you may have guessed, is when you run away from it. And the freeze is you don't do either. You're just stuck in the middle. And how we choose to respond is it varies on a lot of different things: life experiences, the current trigger, how we interpret it. So you might respond in a bunch of different ways to different stressful situations. And so when we're stressed, not only does our brain send these signals, but our body responds in a certain way. So oftentimes you might notice that when you're stressed, your heart's going really fast, you feel like you can't breathe, you might get sweaty, you might get shaky, you might get dizzy. These are some things you might notice. Also too, after we're out of that stressful response, you might be really hungry for sugar, and that's because when you're stressed out, you're using all that energy. You might also notice that you have to go to the bathroom, and that's because, again, when we're in this stressful response, our body is only using vital parts to solve that crisis. And so we'll talk about this a little bit more, just so you have an idea, so you can start thinking about when you're in a crisis, how this affects your body. So the first skill that we're going to be talking about is our stop skill. And so as you may imagine, the first letter is S for stop. So when you're in a stressful situation, the first thing you want to do is you want to stop. You don't want to react. You want to freeze. Going back to kind of what I said earlier, sometimes you could feel like, oh, I wish I had thought about that before I did that, and taken a step back. So that's really what you want to do. You just want to freeze. You don't want to act on anything. You want to see how the situation is affecting you. So then going to the T, which is to take a step back from the situation, take a break. Because you know what, in a few minutes, you might come back to the situation and see it in a completely different way. You might not see it in a different way, but at least if you're giving yourself a break, you're taking some space from what's going on. And then the next is O for observe. So you want to notice what's going on inside you. So what are you thinking? What thoughts are coming up for you? How are you feeling? What's going on in your body? And then you want to look around and you want to see how other people, if this is applicable to you, how are they responding to the situation? And again, this is just the outward experience. You're not going to do any asking why, making inferences. It's going to be very factual. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm feeling. So if you notice yourself say why, don't do that. You're not observing. And then lastly, you're going to go to proceed, which is the P. So this is to act with awareness and think about your goals. So now that you've figured out what's going on, you've taken a step back, you're now pretty mindful of what the situation is, and you can realize, okay, these emotions are affecting me. This is what's going through my head, and this is what I want to happen. So think about, if you do a certain behavior, is that going to help you meet your goals? And again, because sometimes when we're in really intense emotions, that can cloud our judgment of how we act. But if we take a step back, that emotion can go down a little and we can make a better decision. So our next skill is our tip skill. So this is changing your body chemistry. So as I mentioned earlier, when you are stressed, your body chemistry changes. So the first is temperature. So I don't know if you notice when you're stressed, but me personally, I get super hot and I often find I need to like cool down. So the temperature skill, I often have clients too run their hands under cold water. You can run your face under cold water. When I worked at the hospital, we used to give patients frozen oranges because they're less intense than holding an ice cube and they smell good. You can also, if it's cold outside, you can go for a walk, but anything to really change your body chemistry or your body temperature. The next is intense exercise. So this does not mean exercising 24/7. This means in a very short period of time, less than a half hour, you're doing intense exercise, because when you are stressed, again, you are using a lot of energy. You are revved up. So what you could do is you could do like jumping jacks, you could go for a brisk walk, you could go for a run, you could play a sport, lift weights, just doing anything to burn that energy off. And again, you're doing it for a short period of time, and you're going to do it intensely. So it's not going to be like a leisurely walk. The next thing is paced breathing. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of times when people are stressed out, they're taking really short, shallow breaths. And so what you want to do is you want to regulate your breathing. If you regulate your breathing, you're going to regulate your heart rate. The two are connected. So what you can do, there's a few things. You can use YouTube. They have tons of tutorials of regulating your breathing. You can also use Headspace. That's a great app. Students get a discount too on it. Or you'll breathe in for 5 seconds, and then you'll breathe out for 7 seconds. And you'll do 5 and 7. You'll notice how your diaphragm is moving up and down, but also watch your belly go in and out. And just that will help to bring you back down, because if you notice your breathing is like, right, that's going to affect you. That's going to make you more revved up. So then our last one is paired muscle relaxation. And so oftentimes when people are stressed, they're super tense. I notice myself, sometimes I'll have my fists clenched and I'm like, oh, what am I doing here? So this activity is really, you're gonna essentially tense yourself and then relax. So if I'm already tensing my hand, I'm gonna tense it even more for like 5 seconds, same kind of rule as the 5 and 7 rule. And then I'm gonna release it and then tense it and release it. And I'm gonna go through every muscle group in my body that's tense and do the same thing where I tense and release. Again, there's so many tutorials online that can really help you. I find that those are pretty helpful, or you can just do the 5 for 7 rule. Some other things to know is just check in with a healthcare provider if you have any medical conditions, because again, we're changing our body chemistry for some of these things. So our next skill, this is by far one of my favorite skills to do with clients. This is self-soothing skill using our 5 senses. The picture that's on this slide is a beautiful schematic. I love this. It's from blessingmanifesting.com. And I really like that they've made it super up to date. And so you can check this out. It'll be available. But essentially, we're going to change our body chemistry through our 5 senses. And so what you might imagine is the first is vision. So in vision, you want to find something that's pleasant for you to look at. So whatever that is, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can make a spot in your room that's pleasant for you to look at. You can go on Pinterest and make a collage of calming images. You could go for a walk. You can look at the night sky. You can look at the sunrise. If you can get up, you can look at the sunrise. You can look at the sunset. You can look at nature, just really anything. Coloring books are awesome right now. I really like paint by numbers myself, but those are just some things. And then another one is hearing. So oftentimes when we're feeling a certain way, we might want to listen to certain music. So sometimes when we're sad, we might want to have a good cry and find some songs that are really sad, or we don't want that. We want to listen to songs that are invigorating. So what I often tell clients to do is to make playlists for each mood that they're feeling so that they have it on hand. So when I'm feeling anxious, I'll listen to this music, or when I'm feeling sad, I have this, or I'm happy, I have this, whichever. But that's something to try out. You can also listen to calming music. There's tons on YouTube. You can just listen to the sounds around you wherever you are. Right now it's raining here, so I can really hear the rain going. You can also listen to a podcast. You can listen to the radio. If you don't have that, you can just sing. If you play an instrument, you could play an instrument, learn to play an instrument. whatever you might like, whatever will be helpful for you. And then the next is smell. So figuring out what's your favorite smell, what's a smell for you that's calming. Like I said earlier, I really like frozen oranges. I like the way the oranges smell. I feel that that's calming. You can make your favorite food. You can just open up the window outside and smell the air. Like I said, it's raining. It smells pretty good here. It smells like spring. You could also use an oil diffuser. You can use a candle if that will work, but really just anything to change up that sense. And then the next one is taste. So I don't know, thinking of, do you have a comfort food? Do you have a food you don't eat often, but when you do eat it, you feel really good? You could drink a calming drink like a tea or a smoothie. If you like hot chocolate or coffee, something like that. You could also eat a bunch of different flavored foods. So you could eat salty and sweet at the same time, or just, treat yourself, get something you haven't had in a while, and that makes you feel good. And then our last one is touch. So for touch, you can kind of go back to our tip skills and thinking about temperature. So you could take a hot shower, take a hot bath. If you have an animal, touch an animal, pet an animal. You could hug someone if they give you permission. You could put a cold compress on your forehead. You could just even sit somewhere comfortable. Find a place where you are that feels comfortable. Wear clothes that feel comfortable. Wrap yourself in a blanket. Also touch. A lot of people have different different tactile sensations that they like. So some people like smooth things, so you could hold a cold rock. Some people like fuzzy things. You could hold a warm blanket. It all depends on what your preference is. Often when I'm doing this skill with clients, I'll have them come up with their own checklist before a crisis happens and figure out what each sense or what their go-to will be for each of the 5 senses. And then you can even take a picture of it on your phone, because I know that we don't often carry worksheets with us, but just so you have it on hand and you'll know this is what I'm going to do when this happens. All right, so our next skill is radical acceptance. So going back to that second slide, or I think it was the third slide, where we had that scale of change and acceptance. So this is really going to be what we're focusing on, accepting. And so what radical means is all the way, complete and total. You're accepting with your mind, your heart, your body, and you're not going to fight reality even if you wish it was a certain way. When people hear acceptance, they often think, I know this is a big thing in our society, it means that you agree with something, that you like something, that you support it. And that's not what radical acceptance means. It just means that you acknowledge. I like to call it radical acknowledgement versus radical acceptance, just because of that connotation. But it just means that you accept that things are the way they are right now. It is what it is. So for instance, thinking of us right now, like a lot of us are in quarantine, we're doing social distancing. We may not like that. We may be like, geez, I miss my friends. I miss doing this. I miss being able to go out of my house or go to the store when I wanted to. But we have to accept that this is the way it is right now. It doesn't mean it's going to be forever, but it is the way it is right now, and we're doing this for a greater good, and we're really trying to get this pandemic under control. So again, doesn't mean you have to love it. It just means it is what it is. So figuring out what has to be accepted. So this is, again, reality is as it is, realizing that there are limitations on the future for everyone. Also, that life can be worth living even with painful events in it. So even though there can be a lot of painful things, there are a lot of good things that happen in our lives too. Like even with social distancing, myself, like I said, I am not really a huge fan of it, but I've found some pretty positive things that have helped me get on a schedule, have helped me connect with people I haven't talked to in a while. So there can be some good in this. And it's figuring out what the good is for you. So why accept reality? Rejecting reality doesn't change reality. Even if I'm like, I don't like this right now, I don't want it to be this way, it doesn't change it. Reality is as it is. Changing reality requires first accepting reality. If you come up with solutions for how you wish things were, they're not going to fit for how things actually are. Another thing is pain can't be avoided, but it lets us know that something's wrong and something either needs to be changed or accepted. Rejecting reality turns pain into suffering, and refusing to accept reality can keep you stuck. So these are reasons why it might be important to accept reality. And so now we're going to talk about how you can do that, because radical acceptance is a pretty tough skill, I would say, and it takes a lot of practice. So a few things I've come up with are: get rid of the shoulds. If you hear yourself saying, it should be this way, I should be this way, that's telling you that you're fighting reality. Another thing to remind yourself is, even if something isn't pleasant, it is how it is right now, and it just can't be changed at this current moment. Acknowledge the facts of a situation, right? If you hear yourself starting to say why or making inferences, that's how you know you're getting away from the facts. So just being able to identify what is going on. And then recognize how present reality impacts you and not how you wish things could be. So even in this time during quarantine, figure out how that affects you. What emotions are coming up for you? What thoughts are coming up for you? How is it affecting your relationships? And then practicing with your whole self, your body, your mind, and your spirit. And so we've done a lot of work in this presentation on changing our body, but now we're going to focus on our mind. And then the last one is, allow yourself to feel emotions that arise with the present situation. Don't fight them. The more you fight your emotions, the more they're just going to get stronger and keep coming back. Just let them happen. You're feeling that way for a reason. A lot of it is chemistry, is biology, and your emotions will change. They will pass. It's just getting through them. So now that we've talked about reducing our body chemistry, we can really start focusing on our thoughts that come up, because you're no longer revved up in that state of fight or flight, but we're really thinking about, okay, how can we change our thoughts? So this is on top of the self-soothing skill. I would say pros and cons is by far my favorite. So you can use this skill when you're making a decision, and it doesn't have to be a problem decision. It can just be any kind of decision, whether you're deciding to do something, not do something. And I love this drawing here. It's a 4 square. It reminds me of the game I used to play as a child. But essentially, I like this because I think it gives you so much more information than if you were to just do the pros and cons of something, because you're not only doing the pros and cons of you doing something, but you're doing the pros and cons of you not doing something. So I'll give you an example on the next slide here. So I have chosen deciding if I should play Animal Crossing. Now I've picked a rather innocuous example, but you can use this for whatever. This is a real decision that I've been battling with recently. I know, first world problems. But so I have created a pros and cons for deciding whether or not to play Animal Crossing. So if you look at the top on the left-hand side, so doing is playing Animal Crossing. So the pros are, I get to take a break. It takes my mind off everything. Doing something I enjoy. I find that I get to connect with a lot of my friends on Animal Crossing. It's a great way to pass the time. I feel like a minute in that game is like really hours in real life. And then there's always something new to do. I'm finding myself, even when I've done all my tasks, I'm like, oh, I could do this and that. And it takes up a lot of time, and I find it really pleasurable. But then the cons are, time goes by really quickly. I'll start at like 12 p.m. It'll be 5 p.m. before I even know it. Another thing is, sometimes it prevents me from getting other things I need to get done, like my dissertation I could be doing during that time. There's also a risk of binging on the game and no longer enjoying it as much. So those are some cons of playing. I'm sure there are more pros and cons that I haven't thought of. And then, so the next box, not doing. So not playing Animal Crossing. The pros of that is I could probably be more productive. I could save it for another day when I have more time and there's less pressure on me to get whatever it is done. And then a con of not playing Animal Crossing is I don't get to take a break. I don't get to do something I enjoy, and my game won't advance. So again, this is a rather basic example, but you can look, I got so much more information than if I were to just do a pros and cons of playing Animal Crossing. So this is a skill you can use when you're deciding to make any decision in your life that you feel you really want to tackle your emotion and your logical mind. You want to bring them together. This will really help you work through that. So another activity that we're going to do here is how to become mindful of thoughts. So the first thing you want to do is you want to observe what you're thinking, right? And this is going back to what I said, is you don't want to be asking yourself why. You don't want to be making inferences. You just want to notice, this is what I'm thinking right now. This is what's going through my head. Just adopt a curious mind. Let your thoughts just pass through, almost as if like there's ships in an ocean just going by and you're just watching them. You're not getting involved with them. Another thing is, you're not your thoughts. They're thoughts. They're not facts. They're just events of the mind. I often hear clients say things like, I'm a bad person, I'm this, I'm that. No, you're having the thought that you're a bad person. You're having the thought that you're this or that. It's just an event that's happening for your mind. And you can figure out whether or not you want to let an unpleasant event that's happening in your mind affect your experience. Another thing too that I tell clients is, don't try to block or suppress your thoughts. Just let them come up. The more you try not to think about something, the more it's going to come up. If I were to tell you right now to not think about baby elephants for the next minute, what would you have to do? You might be like, don't think about baby elephants. Don't think about baby elephants. But by doing that, you're thinking about baby elephants. So just letting your thoughts come and go, and they'll just go away. Or they might come back, but just noticing your experience. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick activity. And so we are going to notice the thoughts that come up. So as a thought enters your mind, I want you to say to yourself, a thought has entered my mind. You can also say, the thought, whatever it is, XYZ, arose in my mind. Or you can say, I'm noticing the thought that, and whatever the thought is. So we're going to do this for a minute. We're just going to let our thoughts come in and out. And when you notice that you have a thought, try using one of these. Okay, so yeah, so say you have the thought, I'm a bad person, right? By saying, I'm noticing the thought that I'm a bad person is quite different than saying, I'm a bad person. When you say I'm a bad person, you make it sound very like certain and absolute. Whereas if you say, I'm having the thought that, you're recognizing it's just a thought. It's not reality. It's just what's going through your head at that moment. So the next area of skills that we're going to be focusing on, these overlap with a lot of what we've already talked about, but it's called grounding. And so these are strategies to manage emotional pain. It's for when you have those really intense feelings that are coming up, but we're going to try to create some distance between what you're feeling and what's going on the outside. So what's going on in your environment. And what's great about grounding is you can do it anywhere, any place. Nobody really has to know. It really helps you to focus on the present moment, and it's also another form of mindfulness. So what I'd like you to do is we're going to do mental grounding first. So mental grounding is really when you're focusing on, again, the environment around you, and you're doing almost like games in your head. Because oftentimes when we're really feeling a certain way, we're having all these thoughts, and these thoughts are amplifying how we're feeling, and we want to create some distance. So as you'll see here, the first thing I'd like you to do is to describe the environment in detail. So you're going to look around this room and you're just going to describe it in detail. And that doesn't mean, oh, this is a dorm room. It means starting with, for instance, if I were to look at one of the beds, it has a white comforter with pink and orange flowers and really describing it that way. So doing it in depth. And you can do this, it doesn't just have to be this picture. You can do this in the room that you're in, anywhere that you're at, but doing it in excruciating detail. And so that's something that you can try out. And then another thing I love to do with clients, I think it's like I Spy, or reminds me of like Where's Waldo, but like finding in the picture everything that could be green. There's actually a lot of green in this picture that you might not initially notice, but figuring out a specific color and really focusing on that. This is it's meant to be tedious. It's not meant to be exciting or provoke any like arousal or anything like that. Anxiety and excitement can often look like the same thing, but this is just meant to calm you, give you some distance between those emotions, and really just bring you back to the space. And so there's a lot of other mental grounding activities you can do that are on the handout. A lot of the ones that I really like to are like making lists, like lists of your favorite dogs or something like that, or counting like ceiling tiles. Like, again, super tedious, super boring, but meant to give you space. And there are so many of them, so if one doesn't work, you can move on and find another one, but whatever's helpful for you, really. So the next grounding activity that you can try is physical grounding. So mental grounding is more like games you're doing in your head. I guess that's what I would refer to it as, whereas physical grounding is more with your body. So something you could do is, you can take an object around you. So like I have a pen, because a lot of the grounding objects I tend to use are at Wesleyan, but alas, we are working from home. So you can take a pen and sort of like touch the pen and describe it. Okay, this is a smooth pen. It's a little cold because it's been on the counter. It's black, it's gray. Just looking at it, how does it feel in my hand? It's pretty lightweight. And doing it that way. And again, going back to our temperature skill, you can hold an ice cube and change up and describe how that's feeling for you. Another physical grounding activity I like is, and you can't see it because you're on a computer screen, but digging your heels into the ground. When you are stressed, you might notice, again, you're super tensed and you might be shaking your feet, you might be sitting cross-legged, whatever. Digging your feet into the ground and then noticing the tension of where it is in your body and then relaxing that is another way that you can ground. There are so many different ways that you can change your body to help relax you too. And it's just noticing where you're feeling it. And so again, we have a lot of activities on the handouts that you can try. This is just a really brief overview. And then moving on to our next one, which is soothing grounding. And so I often notice when I have clients, they say a lot of mean things to themselves when they're not feeling good. Like they're anxious. Why are you so anxious? Stop being anxious. Or why are you angry? Why are you like, that's not helpful for you if you're feeling a certain way. A lot of times we need to be compassionate with ourselves. So there are things you can say to yourself. Like think of yourself, if you were a small child, would you be screaming at a small child to stop being anxious? Probably not. So you could say to yourself, you're a good person going through a hard time. You'll get through this. Figuring out something that you can say to yourself that feels true and unique for you, because I can give you a million things you can say to yourself, but if that doesn't feel good for you, then it's not going to work. Another thing you can do for soothing grounding is thinking of your favorites, thinking of things that are pleasant for you, remembering an inspiring song, quotation, or a poem that makes you feel better, and then saying a coping statement. I can handle this. I got this. This will pass. It will pass. It just takes time, and we just want to get through that time. And so again, there are other examples on the handout. So I have 2 more activities that I'd like to have us try. And these are ways that you can ground and kind of make it more unique for you. So we're gonna actually do them in the space right now. And so this slide has been left intentionally blank, and that's because I want you to come up with your own, whatever comes to your mind. So I'd like you to get comfortable, find a position that works for you, and notice any tension, and really just figure out how you can sit through the next few minutes and just kind of listen to what I'm going to say. Um, so I'd like you to think about some place you've been or imagine being that feels calm or safe. When you're thinking of this place, try to think of something that's not linked to a negative experience. So just think of something that's calm and safe for you. Perhaps it could be on a beach, it could be on a mountain stream. What image represents your place? So I want you to really think of that image that could be safe and calm for you. And then once you come up with this image, I'd like you to describe what you see. So think of the image and really think about everything that you're seeing, everything that's coming up. Just look around. And then when you think of your calm and safe place, I want you to think about what emotions come up for you when you're there. What feelings are you experiencing? And as you're at your calm and safe place, I'd like you to notice, where do you feel it in your body? What sensations are coming up for you? Okay, and now as you're at your calm and safe place, I'd like you to think of the sights, the sounds, the smells, and again, any other sensations that you notice while you're there. And just really think about what you're experiencing. And then I would like you to name your place. You can name it whatever you want. Just give it a name that signifies your safe place. Okay. And so whenever you're distressed or you need something to cope, I want you to think of this safe place. Sometimes I have clients who really have a hard time falling asleep at night. They're thinking about things that cause them a lot of anxiety, cause them a lot of sadness. And I often will tell them, well, okay, think of your safe place and just notice the changes that are coming up for you and what's happening in your body and seeing if that can help relax you to sleep. So again, whenever you feel like you need to use this skill, just pulling it up. My calm, safe place, it can be anywhere, is me in one of those like Papazon chairs holding a bunch of puppies. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be real, but you can use this anytime that you're really feeling distressed. So we're going to do one more activity similar to this, and then we'll wrap up here. So our next activity is going to be the same kind of thing. You're going to get comfortable. If you notice any tension, shift your weight, figure out how you can sort of relax for this moment. And so we're going to be doing container. I'd like you to develop a container that will help you manage some of the troublesome feelings and memories you have. The container should be strong enough to hold whatever you put in it. It should also have a two-way system that would allow you to put things into it and take things out without any of the other material already inside escaping. The two-way system should allow you to take out only as much of any given problem as you want. The inside of the container should be comfortable enough that the material you put into it will be willing to stay until you're ready to work with it. So take a moment to think about what your container will look like. Just let your mind think of whatever might come up as a container for you. And if you knew your container could hold some of your troublesome feelings and memories, how would you feel? Think about it. And then I'd like you to name your container and just figure out a word or a few words that come to mind when you're thinking of your image that you have of your container. And then I'd like you to do the same as calm, safe place, and you can use this whenever you feel stressed. Again, thinking of the image that represents your container and visualizing a lot of what is hurting you, what is affecting you, just going into this container for a little bit and giving you some relief. And so that wraps up my presentation for today.